Wind moves first, before any human memory, before any name, across the long grasses of the steppe. It bends the endless sea of blades and waves that roll to every horizon, carrying dust, cold, and the thin cries of distant birds. Under a sky so vast it seems to swallow thought, a child is born beside the Onon River, in a camp of felt tents and tethered horses. There is no stone city to mark his arrival, no written record, only the watchful eyes of his clan and the murmurs of old women who see omens in every breath. In his tiny fist, they say, is clenched a knot of dark blood, dense and heavy, a sign that the world has not given birth to a gentle soul, but to a storm. On that harsh Mongolian steppe, in a world of warring tribes, raiding riders, and fragile loyalties, the child receives the name Temujin. One day, the world will call him Genghis Khan. His first cradle is a felt-lined yurt that shakes with the winter winds. Outside, the landscape is both narrow and infinite. A circle of hills and rivers that seems to contain everything, yet opens outward without walls. His father, Yesugei, is a chieftain of the Borgigan clan, a man hardened by riding and warfare, whose life is measured out in horse herds, spears, and the loyalties of his followers. His mother, Holun, was once abducted from another tribe and claimed as his wife, and she bears the memory of that violent loss in a fierce protectiveness over her children. In the nights when wolves howl beyond the circle of firelight, she tells them stories of ancestors who rode with the sky god above them, and of a world where only strength and loyalty keep death at bay. Temujin's earliest memories are of hoofbeats, the smell of horses, and the taste of meat cooked over open fires. The steppe does not allow softness. Children learn to ride almost as soon as they can walk, to string small bows, to endure cold that bites the skin raw. Tribes clash over water and pasture land, over slights both real and imagined. Alliances form and dissolve like frost at sunrise. The boy watches men arrive as honored guests one season and as enemies in the next. He breathes in the laws of the steppe before he can name them. To survive, you must belong to a strong hand. To thrive, you must become it. The world beyond his camp is fragmented, a mosaic of tribes that trade, steal, intermarry, and betray. The Tatars, the Merkit, the Naimans, the Carrot, each has its own banners, its own leaders, its own proud memories of past greatness. There is no empire, no law that stretches beyond the reach of a single warlord's voice. The Chinese dynasties to the south see these nomads as savage raiders, dangerous but disunited. To many, the steppe is a borderland of chaos and cruelty. For Temujin, it is home, and it will be the anvil on which his character is hammered into something the world has never seen. When he is still a boy, his father takes him on a journey to seek a bride, as is the custom. They ride across rivers and hills to the camp of the Ongirat, and there Temujin meets Borte, the girl who will one day be his queen. A bond is arranged between the families, a promise that ties the future of two children to the shifting fortunes of their clans. On the return journey, fate reveals its teeth. Yesugei accepts hospitality from Tatars who recognize him. They raise bowls of fermented mare's milk, smiling with false warmth. In the poison, they serve lies, not only the end of a man, but the unmooring of a family. Yesugei falls ill, his strength leaking away day by day until he can no longer ride. He is carried back toward his own camp, toward the people who depend on his leadership. Before he can reach them, death takes him. The chieftain's body grows cold, and with it, the bonds that held the clan together begin to dissolve. In the harsh arithmetic of the steppe, a widow with young children and no powerful protector is a burden, not a treasure. The men who had once eaten at Yesugei's fire look at Holun and her sons and see mouths to feed with no strong hand to shield them. One morning, Temujin wakes to find the camp thinning. Carts move away, herds are driven off, warriors ride in widening circles that do not return. His clan has abandoned him. Holun gathers her children, grief and rage burning in her eyes, and leads them into the wilderness. They become a family of ghosts, wandering the steppe, scraping for roots, trapping fish in the icy river, hunting small animals with makeshift snares. Hunger becomes a constant presence, a dull ache that never fully leaves. Temujin learns that even blood ties can break, that the only loyalty that lasts is the one sealed not just by kinship, but by a deeper kind of bond. He grows into a youth in this desolate exile, learning to read the wind and the moods of men with equal care. His older half-brother, better, resentful and domineering, becomes a rival even within their small band. Tensions simmer until the day rage and fear explode in a fatal arrow shot. Temujin kills Bader, spilling blood of his own blood. It is a dark initiation into the cycle of violence that will thread through his entire life. A reminder that power is often taken, not given. The steppe does not forget. Temujin's family, weakened and isolated, becomes vulnerable to enemies who see advantage in removing even the possibility of his rise. The Tayichiud, a related but hostile clan, capture him. They force a heavy wooden collar around his neck, a kango that marks him as a slave. He is kept under guard, used for menial tasks, his body shackled even as his mind roams free. Nights are spent gazing at the stars through prisoned eyes, his thoughts moving out across the land that he cannot yet ride. He sees the silhouettes of men who own him and imagines them one day kneeling. Opportunity comes, as it often does in the lives of the desperate, sudden, and fleeting. During a moment of carelessness in his captors, Temujin escapes. He plunges into river and reads, the weight of the wooden collar dragging at his shoulders. The water is cold, the mud clutches at his feet, but the promise of freedom is a fire in his chest. With help from a sympathetic servant who risks his own life, the collar is broken and discarded. Temujin emerges from the river reborn, no longer a slave, not yet a conqueror, but something new, hardened, and sharpened. In the years that follow, his life is a chain of struggles and small alliances. He gathers to himself men who share his hunger for a different kind of world, men who have seen the cruelty of arbitrary power and long for a leader who rewards loyalty and skill rather than noble birth alone. Among these companions are warriors of remarkable courage and ability, men whose names will one day carry weight far beyond the steppe. They are drawn to Temujin because they see in him a rare combination of ferocity and fairness, of ruthlessness against enemies and generosity toward those who stand at his side. He reclaims Borte, his betrothed, in a campaign that entwines his destiny with the greater politics of the steppe. She is seized in a raid by the Merkit, an old enemy of his family. Temujin does not accept this loss. He seeks the aid of Togrul, the Kurultai Khan, who had once been an ally of his father and of his childhood friend Jamukha, a noble of high lineage. Together, their forces strike the Merkit at dawn, shattering their camp, rescuing captives, and asserting Temujin's will on a larger stage. Borte returns to his tent, and with her comes not only personal joy, but increased status. He has shown that he can call upon powerful allies and emerge victorious. For a time, Temujin and Jamukha are close, sworn companions who share meat and shelter, who dream together of greatness. But the steppe is too narrow for two rising suns. Their visions differ. Jamukha clings to the old ways, where noble birth confers privilege and common warriors know their place. Temujin sees another path, one in which men are measured by their loyalty and skill, not by the bloodlines of their ancestors. This difference is not merely political. It cuts into the very heart of how power is created and held. The bond between them, once strong, begins to fray. The break comes, and when it does, it brings blood. Tribes must choose sides. Camps shift, banners change, friendships are tested. Jamukha strikes first with terrible force. At one point, he captures some of Temujin's followers and, in a display meant to terrorize, has 70 young warriors boiled alive. On the steppe, terror is a weapon as sharp as any sword. Temujin learns from this cruelty, not to imitate it exactly, but to understand its impact. The memory of those murders burns into him. Mercy will come to those who bend the knee, but for those who betray and defy him, vengeance will be absolute. The struggle between the two men culminates in battles that shake the alliances of many tribes. Slowly, Temujin's approach begins to triumph. Warriors who feel overlooked and oppressed in the traditional hierarchies find in him a leader who will elevate them for their deeds. Captured enemies who demonstrate courage and skill are sometimes offered a place within his own ranks rather than immediate death. His army becomes a mosaic of peoples, integrated through strict discipline and shared purpose. The old tribal divisions blur and are replaced by a new identity centered on loyalty to the leader and to the idea of a united Mongol nation. By the time a great assembly of clans gathers near the Onon River around the year 1206, the balance has decisively shifted. The Kurultai, a council of chiefs and warriors, convenes to recognize the new reality. Tribes that once raided one another now stand under a single banner. Temujin is acclaimed as the supreme leader of all the Mongols. In that moment, his personal name begins to recede before a new title. He becomes Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. With unity comes transformation. He dismantles the old lineage-based structures and reorganizes his people along military lines that erase narrow tribal affiliations. Tens, hundreds, thousands, and 10,000s, the decimal organization binds warriors into new units that mix men from different clans, ensuring that loyalty flows upward to the Khan rather than sideways to local chieftains. Each unit is responsible not only for fighting, but for the welfare and discipline of its members. The army becomes a single organism, flexible and relentless. Genghis Khan imposes a code that later generations will call the Great Law, a combination of traditional steppe customs and new decrees that codify behavior in war and peace. Theft, adultery, and certain forms of deceit draw harsh penalties. Religious practice is granted a surprising measure of freedom, so long as it does not threaten the unity of his realm. The Khan is ruthless when he must keep order, but he understands that a vast empire of nomads and settled peoples cannot be held by terror alone. There must be consistency, predictability, and a sense that justice, however severe, is impartial. He builds a system of communication that binds his spreading domains together. Relay stations, with fresh horses and riders, are established at regular intervals along major routes. Messages, orders, and intelligence can now travel with unprecedented speed from one edge of the steppe to another, and eventually far beyond. This YAM network becomes the nervous system of an empire, allowing Genghis Khan to coordinate campaigns across distances that would paralyze less organized states. As internal order solidifies, external horizons expand. The steppe, once a patchwork of feuding clans, becomes a launch pad. Genghis Khan's eye turns toward neighboring powers that had long treated the Mongols as troublesome raiders rather than serious threats. To the south lies the wealth of northern China, controlled by the Jin Dynasty with its walled cities, rich farmlands, and sophisticated bureaucracy. To the west and southwest lie powerful confederations and kingdoms, including the Tangut state of Xixia and the remnants of the Khitan and other peoples who had founded and lost dynasties on the edges of China. The Mongol armies that roll out from the steppe are unlike the lumbering forces of settled states. They move with extraordinary speed, living off their herds, each warrior leading several horses so that mounts can be rotated and never exhausted. They carry composite bows of layered horn and wood, small but capable of sending arrows with deadly power across great distances. Their tactics emphasize mobility, feigned retreat, encirclement, and the coordinated use of light and heavy cavalry. They scout thoroughly, gather intelligence on enemy terrain and dispositions, and exploit every weakness. When Genghis Khan confronts the Jin armies, he is not intimidated by their numbers or the apparent solidity of their defenses. He uses the vastness of the steppe to his advantage, luring enemy forces out of strongholds, cutting supply lines, and avoiding direct confrontation until conditions are favorable. Siegecraft, at first a weak point in Mongol capabilities, is acquired through the recruitment of engineers and specialists from conquered peoples. Chinese, Khitan, and Muslim siege engineers are absorbed into the Mongol war machine, bringing with them knowledge of catapults, trebuchets, and other engines. The Mongols learn to build siege lines, dams, and towers, turning static urban strengths into vulnerabilities. City after city in northern China falls. Some surrender and are spared heavy destruction in exchange for tribute and cooperation. Others resist and are taken by storm, their populations subject to massacre. Genghis Khan calibrates his brutality according to strategic needs. When a city's resistance is particularly fierce, he may order terrible slaughter, not only as punishment but as a warning to others. Word spreads swiftly along trade routes and through refugee tales. Many settlements, faced with the choice, decide that opening their gates and offering hostages is preferable to annihilation. In this way, terror becomes a calculated instrument of policy, yet he is not merely a destroyer. In captured territories, he often preserves local administrators who can manage civilian affairs under Mongol supervision. Trade routes that were once fragmented and dangerous are brought under a kind of brutal peace, allowing caravans to travel from the edges of Europe to the shores of the Pacific under the shadow of Mongol authority. The warrior from the steppe, who once knew only the horizons of grass and sky, now presides over cities where markets buzz in dozens of tongues, where caravans from distant Persia, India, and the Mediterranean mingle. It is to that distant west that Genghis Khan will next turn, drawn by a mixture of trade interests, political anger, and the ever-present hunger for expansion. The Khwarezmian Empire stands as a major power spanning from Persia to Central Asia, ruling over cities such as Samarkand, Bukhara, and Urgench. Genghis Khan initially seeks peaceful relations, sending a caravan of merchants under Mongol protection, and, later, a diplomatic mission, offering trade and alliance. What happens next will ignite one of the most devastating campaigns in the history of warfare. The governor of Otrar, suspicious and greedy, accuses the Mongol traders of espionage and has them murdered, their goods seized. The diplomatic envoys sent by Genghis Khan to protest are treated with contempt. One is killed. Others are mutilated and sent back. For a ruler who regards the messenger as inviolable, this is an unforgivable insult. It is not only an attack on his people, but a direct challenge to his legitimacy and honor. The wrath that forms in him is not hot and fleeting. It is cold, deliberate, and methodical. He gathers his forces for a march into the heart of the Khwarezmian lands. The distances are immense, the terrain varied, but the Mongol machine moves with precision. He divides his armies, sending columns along different routes, converging on key cities like jaws closing on prey. The defenders are taken off guard by the speed of his advance and the multiplicity of his attacks. In every corner of their realm, it seems, Mongol horsemen appear, spreading panic and confusion. Otrar, the city where the first caravan was destroyed, is placed under siege. For months, Mongol forces encircle it, cutting off supplies, building siege works, launching repeated assaults. When the city finally falls, its walls breached, and its defenders exhausted, the retribution is absolute. The population is killed or enslaved. The treacherous governor is captured, and his fate is a slow and terrible death. The destruction of Otrar is a message written in blood and fire. Bukhara faces a different kind of assault. According to some accounts, Genghis Khan himself rides into the city once its defenses falter and its gates are forced open. He addresses its leaders, pointing out the folly of trusting their distant Shah to protect them instead of relying on their own judgment. Whether or not the exact words remembered later are accurate, the spirit of the episode reflects his approach. He uses moments of conquest to teach lessons, to remold psychological realities. The citizens of other cities watching the fall of Bukhara and the subsequent punishment understand that their loyalty to rulers who cannot defend them is of little value. Samarkand, a jewel of the Islamic world, falls after a hard siege. Its garrison is crushed, its inhabitants subjected to mass killing and enslavement. Chroniclers describe pyramids of skulls erected as monuments to Mongol victory, rivers choked with bodies, and fields left barren. Whether numbers are exaggerated or not, the essence is undeniable. Genghis Khan wages war not only against armies, but against the very idea of resistance. Those who defy him can expect not just defeat, but erasure. Yet even as he destroys, he preserves. Artisans, scribes, and skilled workers are often spared and sent eastward to serve the growing needs of the Mongol realm. Weavers, metalworkers, architects, and scholars find themselves uprooted from their homes and transplanted into distant lands, contributing to the surprising cultural synthesis that will later emerge from the ashes of conquest. Intelligence networks are created from captured administrators and merchants who know the intricacies of their regions. Genghis Khan values information as highly as courage, and he builds a multi-layered system of scouts, spies, and informants who feed him knowledge of roads, resources, and rivalries. As his armies push as far as the Caucasus and the edges of the Russian plains, they clash with new opponents, testing tactics against different styles of warfare. Heavy armored cavalry, forest-dwelling tribes, and fortress cultures all confront the Mongol tidal wave, and most are swept aside. The small reconquest missions that he sends westward under trusted generals like Subutai and Jebe probe deep, reaching as far as the kingdoms of Georgia and northern principalities of the Rus. They leave cities burned and fields devastated, then turn back, having mapped routes that will one day be used for larger invasions. All the while, Genghis Khan remains anchored in his identity as a child of the steppe. Even when visiting captured cities, he prefers the open air, the felt tent, the smell of horses over the heavy stone and perfumed chambers of palaces. He remains devout in his own spiritual tradition, honoring the eternal blue sky as the ultimate power above kings and khans. Shamans and holy men walk his camps, reading omens, advising the ruler, reminding him that even the greatest conqueror is small beneath the vault of heaven. Within his own family, victories do not erase tensions. His sons, Jochi, Chagatai, Ogadai, and Tolui, grow into men with their own ambitions and rivalries. Questions swirl about the legitimacy of Jochi, born shortly after Borte's period of captivity among the Merkit. Whispered doubts about his true father, though never fully resolved, fuel distrust between him and his brothers. Chagatai is fierce and proud, quick to take offense and to guard tradition. Ogadai, more moderate and inclined toward compromise, becomes Genghis Khan's choice as successor, a decision that reflects the Khan's desire for balance in the storm after his death. Tolui, the youngest, is a formidable commander whose descendants will later dominate the heartlands of the empire. Genghis Khan must manage not only world conquest, but the succession of his own line. He calls for councils, extracts, oaths, and tries to ensure that after his death, the vast edifice he has built will not immediately collapse into civil war. He divides territories into appanages for his sons and grandsons, tying them to the empire while also giving them stakes that could become sources of tension. He knows that the unity of the Mongols is the engine of everything he has achieved. He also knows how fragile that unity can be. In the final phase of his life, Genghis Khan turns again toward China, launching campaigns against the Tangut state of Xijia and pressing the Jin dynasty further. Age and constant campaigning begin to weigh on him. There are stories of a fall from a horse, of injuries that do not heal. Other tales speak of illness, of a body worn down by decades of riding, fighting, and harsh weather. The exact cause of his decline is as clouded as many other details of his life, but the direction is clear. Even the greatest warlord cannot ride forever. He continues to command, to plan sieges and troop movements, but moments of reflection deepen. The spiritual dimension of his rule becomes more pronounced. He orders that certain mountains and sites be protected as sacred, forbidding hunting or exploitation there. He shows concern for omens and for the favor of the sky god. He has destroyed countless lives and reshaped entire civilizations, yet he remains conscious that he is, in his own understanding, an instrument of a higher power that can give and take away dominion. During a renewed campaign against Xixia, as Mongol forces press the Tangut to the edge of annihilation, Genghis Khan falls gravely ill. He withdraws to his tent, surrounded by a small circle of family and trusted commanders. Outside, the camps stretch over the plains like a small city of felt and horse lines. Fires burn, and the sound of low voices mixes with the restless shifting of thousands of animals. Inside, the man who once lay as a starving boy in the snow and mud now lies under fine fabrics, his body marked by scars and age. He gives final instructions. Xixia is to be destroyed utterly, as punishment for defiance. His succession plans are confirmed. Ogedei is to be Khan after him. He reminds his family of the need to hold the empire together, of the dangers of internal discord. Whether he senses how soon the realm will fracture into separate khanates is unknown. He dies without fanfare to the wider world, in a tent on campaign, far from any stone tomb or carved monument. There is no orchestra of trumpets, no written obituary, only the sudden, empty space where his will once stood. What follows his death is shrouded in such secrecy that it becomes one of the great, enduring mysteries of history. His body is taken away under guard, transported back toward Mongolia. According to legend, those who encountered the funeral cortege on the road were killed to preserve the secret of the burial site. Some tales speak of trees planted over the grave, rivers diverted to flow across it, horses driven back and forth to erase all marks. The very landscape is said to have been reshaped to conceal where Genghis Khan rests. Whether these details are literal or symbolic, the core truth persists. His tomb has never been found. The greatest conqueror of the land lies somewhere under the same earth he once rode, hidden from the eyes of archaeologists and treasure seekers, absorbed into the anonymity of the steppe. In death, as in life, he straddles the line between legend and reality. His name becomes a banner under which his descendants launch further campaigns. Under Ogedei and later Khans, Mongol armies surge into Eastern Europe, smashing armies at places like Liegnitz and Mohi, reaching the gates of Vienna before turning back. They complete the conquest of the Jin and Southern Song in China, establishing a Mongol dynasty over a land that once saw them only as raiders. They carve khanates across the Middle East, Russia, and Central Asia. The empire that Genghis Khan founded becomes the largest continuous land empire the world has ever seen, stretching from the Pacific to the Black Sea, from Siberia to the edges of the Indian subcontinent. The legacy he leaves is double-edged. On the one hand, his campaigns bring unspeakable destruction. Cities burned, populations massacred, irrigation systems ruined, libraries and treasures lost beyond recall. The demographic and economic shocks echo for generations. Entire cultures reel under the trauma of sudden devastation. Chroniclers in Persia, Russia, China, and the Islamic heartlands record horrors that seem almost beyond comprehension, and they attach his name to a whirlwind of death. On the other hand, his empire creates conditions for unprecedented exchange. Under the protection of Mongol rule, merchants and travelers move more freely along the Silk Roads. Ideas, technologies, and religions cross boundaries with new ease. Gunpowder, paper money, printing techniques, and other innovations spread more widely. Diplomatic missions travel between distant courts. The Venetian traveler Marco Polo, born long after Genghis Khan's death, will one day journey through lands shaped by his descendants, bringing back to Europe tales of cities and customs that challenge entrenched assumption. His administrative reforms influence the regions he conquers in ways that outlive the collapse of Mongol political dominance. He establishes practices of census-taking, structured taxation, and relay communication that are adopted and adapted by successor states. In China, the Mongol Yuan dynasty leaves behind both scars and institutions. In Russia, Mongol overlordship reshapes political culture, centralizing power in ways that will echo in the later rise of Moscow. His personal image morphs depending on who tells the story. To some, he is the scourge of God, a punishment inflicted on sinful peoples. To others, he is a lawgiver and unifier, a champion of merit and discipline who broke the chains of narrow tribalism. In Mongolia, his memory becomes the foundation of national identity, a symbol of past greatness and unity in a land dominated for centuries by foreign empires. His portrait appears on currency, his name is invoked in songs and political speeches, his statue rises in metal and stone against the same sky under which he was born. The psychology of Genghis Khan remains a subject of endless fascination because it is a study in contrasts sharpened to extremes. He could order the slaughter of entire cities and yet spare a handful of artisans because he saw their usefulness. He could reward a former enemy with high rank after being impressed by bravery or skill. He could be deeply loyal to those who prove themselves and implacably vengeful against betrayal. The boy who was abandoned and enslaved never forgot the terror of vulnerability. The Khan, who would never again endure such helplessness, shaped a society where loyalty upward was rewarded and disloyalty downward crushed. His genius lay not only in personal courage or battlefield savvy, but in his ability to see patterns across vast spaces. He understood that to hold an empire that spanned thousands of kilometers, one must control not only territory but movement. Hence the relay stations, the communication lines, the emphasis on strict discipline. He grasped that fear could move faster than any messenger, and he used it, but he also knew that fear alone cannot sustain armies in the long term. His charisma, his ability to speak to the aspirations and grievances of those beneath him, forged bonds that lasted beyond his own lifetime. In the end, the image of Genghis Khan is inseparable from the landscape that made him. The Mongolian steppe, with its winds and silences, its harsh winters and fertile summers, formed his earliest sense of what is possible. It taught him that life is precarious and that alliances are fragile, that a man can rise from abandonment to supremacy if he learns to ride the currents of fate instead of being drowned by them. It also taught him that under the endless sky, human glory is fleeting. No matter how many battles are won, no matter how many lands are taken, there comes a day when every warrior's horse stands riderless. Yet some names, some deeds, refuse to vanish. Centuries after his bones have turned to dust, the world still speaks of Genghis Khan. His story has grown like a tree whose roots are sunk deep into myth and whose branches stretch into every corner of historical memory. To some, he is a monster, to others, a hero. To all, he is a reminder that within the human capacity for leadership lies both the potential for unimaginable greatness and the capacity for devastation on a scale beyond any single life. On cold nights in Mongolia, when stars burn hard and clear above the darkened plains, it is easy to imagine the distant echo of hooves, the shimmer of banners against the horizon, the silhouette of a rider whose gaze sweeps from river to mountain to sea. The boy who clenched a knot of blood in his fist grew into a man who gripped the throat of half the known world. His empire has long since fragmented, its borders erased and redrawn many times, but the currents he set in motion still swirl through our present. Trade networks, cultural exchanges, political boundaries, and national identities bear his fingerprints. In the final reckoning, Genghis Khan is less a figure we can neatly judge than a force we must try to understand. He emerged from a fragmented, violent world and forged it into something terrifyingly unified. He wrote his vision on the earth with fire and iron, tearing down and building up, binding together peoples who had never before seen themselves as part of any common story. His life was a cinematic odyssey made real. A journey from starvation and slavery to the head of the greatest land empire the earth has ever seen. The wind still runs across the steppe, whispering through the grass, as it did when he was born and as it did when his funeral cortege passed secretly toward its unknown resting place. It knows where he lies. It has moved over his unmarked tomb for centuries, erasing the footprints of those who buried him, carrying away the last human traces. Yet no wind can erase the mark he placed on history. Somewhere under that endless sky, the earth holds the bones of a man who changed the course of civilizations. Above them, the world he reshaped continues to turn, forever haunted and illuminated by the memory of Genghis Khan.